Welcome to Monday Morning Coffee with Inside the Firm. Each week, our hosts will be interviewing local, regional, and national business leaders to give you an inside peek into how they lead their business to success in the ever-competitive business climate.
Welcome to Monday Morning Coffee with Inside the Firm. Today, I have a very special guest with a most beautiful background full of wonderful colors. Her name is Trina L. Martin, and she is a technologist, author, speaker, leadership coach, and fellow podcaster. She uses her experiences to motivate audiences to overcome adversity, develop self-determination, and discipline. Trina also inspires emerging leaders to pursue their wildest dreams with heart and grit. She is also the author of the book, From a Mess to Amazing, 7 Steps to Create the Life You Deserve, a contributing writer for the Thrive Global, and a co-author of the anthology Make It Happen. Trina, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, it's an honor. I love your background, and I kind of wanted to get in that right away. So I was reading about your bio, and that you're a first generation in your family to attend college. I'm much the same, with kind of a similar background. Tell us about how you overcame that lack of support at home to succeed and then graduate, because I had much of the same.
You know, it was something that fueled me. So just to give you a brief background on my beginnings, I grew up in Chicago. I'm the youngest of 4 children to a single mother. And my mother was very verbally abusive to me. I mean, tearing me down, saying that from I was ugly to lazy, not going to do anything. So that trauma and that abuse actually fueled me, because the only thing I could think about in my whole entire life growing up was, I have to get away from this woman. This is such a miserable life. I have to get away from her. So that's what I did. I ended up going away to college. That was my goal, because my siblings had stayed in the Chicago area, even though they went on to get married and have lives and things like that on their own. They stayed in the Chicago area. And I was like, I'm not going to do that. So college was my way out. And basically, I went to college. I self-financed. After my first year, I ended up joining the Army to help pay for my education. And I just kept going and never looked back. My way of being resilient was to get away from that atmosphere. So that kept me driving towards success.
Yeah, that takes a lot of grit to do. I got to commend you for that. And again, you know, the parallels that I just feel between us in the way that we did it, there's something there. I too just went through the complete other side of the state, had to get out of that situation. Did you find any mentors along the way, though, that sort of filled the gap and connected that bridge, that maybe did give you that kind of support, even if it was just talking to them and understanding how all of this works?
You know, I'm glad you asked that question, because as I was growing up, I didn't know what a mentor was, honestly. Mm-hmm. I was basically my feet to the fire, learning as I went along. I actually graduated from the School of Hard Knocks. Mm-hmm. And looking back, I wish I had had a mentor, but only thing at that time, I just knew I had to get away. I wanted to do things to make sure that I was successful for myself, not so much as outwardly successful to other people, but successful to myself, as far as not going back home to Chicago, not going back where my mother would be like, see, I told you, that type of thing. So that was my driving thing. Didn't know anything about a mentor. I actually read a lot. There were a lot of people that I looked at and said, wow. And I guess I kind of learned from afar. But as far as personally having someone that I could actually consult with and that could advise me, I did not have that.
Yeah, it's tough to find for some people, for sure. Well, I'm glad you were able to at least find externalities that then you could, like you said, you learned from afar. What did you go after in college? And then tell us a little bit about how the Navy, because you were in the Navy and that sort of helped pay for college, right? Tell us about that journey, and then what ultimately maybe led you to your first company.
Yeah, actually, okay, so I pursued computer science. So I actually got my undergrad in computer science. And like I said, when I went to college, I did a year. After my freshman year, I joined the Army. Now, this was in 1990. So If you remember 1990, Desert Storm was going on, things of that nature. So at the time, the job that I had in the Army was chemicals, and that was NBC, nuclear biological chemicals. Now I think they call it CBRN, like, whatever chemical, whatever it stands for now. So I did 3 years in the Army. I was actually called to go to Desert Storm. And at the last minute, they said, okay, we don't need you. So I was like, okay, this is not what I thought it was going to be. So I ended up switching services and went to the Navy. So I transferred over services. And just from there, my career went on for the next 30 years. I ended up getting my commission in the Navy to become an officer. And, my life actually changed because of that. And I finished school, went on to work in private sector. I went on to get a master's degree and then start my company, which all of those things, from looking back now, looking at the childhood that I had to today, all of those things kind of played into me being where I am today. Now, would I have decided or chosen to have a verbally abusive mother? Of course not. But when you get older, you get wiser. If you can reflect on things, you kind of see how all of that ended up shaping, it ended up shaping me and developing my character that I am today. So all of those things led me to where I am today. And I just decided to take my experience in leadership that I gained from the military, all the years in the military doing computers and out in private sector. And I decided, hey, let me put all of this together and do something for myself, because I've always wanted to work for myself. And that's what I did.
And so when did you start your business? Tell us about your business. And then what do you do to help others?
So my business ended up, so I've had different businesses. This one actually that I have rebranded it a couple of times. But when the pandemic hit, I decided, you know what? I really have a skill that I think people need, which is technology. And my core of my business is I help small and medium-sized businesses use secure communication technologies to elevate their business operations. So as we all know, when the pandemic hit, we were all thrust into a world that we never thought we would ever be in, and especially businesses. And meaning that communicating from home via like what we're doing, Skype, technology, doing conference calls, all of these things that nobody ever thought that we would do. And for the small and medium-sized business that doesn't have a IT department, it was very tough for them. So I took my expertise to say, hey, you know what? Let me show them how to do this. And not only do it, but do it securely, because we're in a world now that if you haven't been hacked or had your credit card number stolen or anything of that nature, it's not a matter of if it happens, it's a matter of when. So that's what I'm trying to teach these small and medium-sized businesses, that, okay, you need to protect yourself because you're not a Google. You're not someone who has a big IT department that has that infrastructure. So there's things that you have to do more so than them to actually be able to operate. Because if you get hacked, it could take a small or medium-sized business down for months, if not just completely destroy their business. So that's what I'm trying to avoid in helping these businesses.
How did you get your first clients when you first started your business?
Word of mouth. I always had people coming to me because they knew I had over, 2 decades in IT, saying, hey, how do I do this or how do I do that? And eventually it rolled into, like, I had a friend, she started her business and somebody was like, wow, this and that. She's like, oh, Trina is the one who helped me with this. So just word of mouth, people, referring, or people coming to me because they knew it was something I did. And that's how it happened.
Yeah. What is, if you could share with our audience, just so you know, is a lot of entrepreneurs, a lot of business people, a lot of startups, and people who are thinking about starting a business. And one thing we try to unpack for them and hopefully give them a little bit of glimpse so they don't have to go through it is sharing lessons that you and I, business owners, have learned right away that maybe we can help them avoid. Is there one early business owner lesson that you could share with our audience that you could think of that maybe like, man, I wish somebody would have told me this and I could have avoided that?
There is a lot, but I'm going to share this one because I recently had to do it myself. And that is, once you get to a point, fire yourself.
Oh my goodness.
And I mean it in a good way, because as entrepreneurs, as you know, we wear all the hats, right? Mm-hmm. Especially when you're starting out. You're doing this, you're doing that, you're doing everything from sweeping the floors to everything. Mm-hmm. And I was doing that as well. And I started to get really burnt out. I was going, man, I'm exhausted, I'm tired, and I was just like, okay, I get it. And then it started to become daunting because, like you said, I have a podcast as well. You know what goes into podcasting. Mm-hmm. It's a job. It's not just something that you just do boom, boom, boom. You got a lot of things to do with it. And I love the show and I love doing it. But then it started becoming like, I was like, oh my God, I got to do graphics. I got to edit the podcast. I got to do this. And then trying to work, get my speaking, going on speaking events and then client. So saying all of that to say, when you get to a point where you can fire yourself from something so that you're not always in the small minutia of the business, do that. And I had to do that with hiring a virtual assistant. Mm-hmm. So just having somebody to help like go through emails and say, okay, this is junk, or here's something you need to respond to. That took such a load off of me that I was like, okay, now I don't feel so overwhelmed when it comes to doing the podcast. So if I could give the entrepreneurs out there any advice, is whenever you're at that point where okay, I'm getting stressed out. When you're getting stressed out and you're doing something you love, it means that you need another system. You need to improve on something. So 9 times out of 10, we'd like to hold on to things because it's our baby, right? We like, I know exactly how I like to do this, and I started just documenting things, saying, okay, I know this in my head, but let me start writing this down. And slowly but surely, I started turning things over to my virtual assistant, saying, okay, here's how I answer this particular email. This is what I want you to sound like. This is what I want you to do. And it has taken a load of stress off of me.
Yeah. And I'm sure it's led to you being able to reconcentrate back on doing the things you love, right? And then the creativity comes out and the passion, and then it's not a job again. It's a passion and you're getting paid to do it.
Exactly.
Yeah. I love that. That's a great piece of advice. Thank you for sharing that. Let's kind of transition into your speaking and your leadership coaching. Yes. Where does that fall into the mix? Was it before you started your businesses, or was it kind of in tandem? How did you get into that line of work?
Well, honestly, before, because as I said, I'm a naval officer. So I've always kind of been in the leadership position. So my career in the military, I went 30 years, and 16 of that 30, I was a commissioned officer. So being in leadership and kind of mentoring and guiding people was something that I've always done. And I actually found that I enjoyed it. It was very rewarding to me for people to say, hey, I really respect you. The advice you gave me really helped, or just knowing that people trusted me enough to coach me. So what I've done, and since you read that bio, I've kind of tweaked that as well. Not so much into just general leadership, but I have niched down into helping women of color in tech either pursue leadership or elevate to the next leadership position that they want. Because as we know, women in tech are underrepresented, they're underpaid, they're discriminated against. And because that was something I did, and I'm thinking, okay, I got into tech in the 90s, and this is still going on. And here we are, 2021. So that's where I'm focusing at now, and to help those women out there to reach that level of leadership that they want to get to.
Yeah, that's great. I think that's a big responsibility once you do recognize what you said about when people do trust you, and what kind of weight that holds when you're giving that kind of advice and coaching. For sure, coaches I think are doing some of the best work in the world. Truly God's work. Tell us about the speaking life and business in general since COVID hit. For you, has it been sort of a boom? What have you been seeing sort of on the ground?
I have done a lot of virtual speaking. A lot of companies have hired me to do virtual speaking. I'm actually going to be doing the ADA List conference in October, speaking there. It's a big tech conference. So people are changing. So a lot of companies are not doing so much as the in person, because we know we're still in the middle of a pandemic, right? But now the thing is, what speaking is going to is kind of a hybrid of events. You have some people that may be in person, the other may be online. And I think that's the way that we're going to go. And like I was telling people just in general, I said how we once knew our life before the pandemic is no more. So what we're living in today is our new normal. How you and I are sitting here communicating now, that's our new normal. People thought, okay, this will just be a little time doing this and then we're going to go back. I don't see that. I don't see I don't see businesses spending as much as they used to fly people all over the world, because now we know what we can do, right? We can do Zoom, we can do so many other things. So why would a company, unless it's just necessary, why would they send you wherever when they know you can get on Zoom and be just as productive? So I don't see us operating like we used to. We're going to have some resemblance of what we used to do, but I think it's going to look very differently and have a lot of different additions into it.
Do you see, maybe you could provide, do you have any bleeding edge ideas, something that you see maybe that the audience you're privy to, and you see us with this kind of boom into more virtualization overall since COVID hit, that pushed us into it. But do you see any other places like business owners should be really not so much focused on, but aware of maybe another trend? Is there any trends you see on the horizon as a technologist maybe you could speak towards?
And this is not so much as far as tech, but I think as far as businesses are concerned, I think a lot of businesses are going straight online now. Again, there's no need to occupy a building, pay for utilities, things like that. So a lot of people are finding that, okay, I could have and run my business successfully. Even some businesses that may have been small and successful before, but maybe they had a little office space somewhere. They may be thinking now, okay, you know what? I don't have to pay rent for that because now I can do all of this stuff remotely. And then that's where I come in at, because if that's the case, and you say you have your employees or you have clients that are working in remote locations and you need to talk to them, you want to do that securely, because you don't want to send customer information just via email or text or things like that. So I really see that businesses are kind of adopting and getting used to that. Okay, there are certain things that we can do virtually and still be profitable from it. Yeah,
definitely. I touched on the word just a little bit. This word technologist, it really stuck out to me when I was looking you up and understanding what you do. Tell us about branding yourself as that, as a technologist. What is that? If you can unpack that term for us a little bit, what does it entail as far as what you do day in, day out?
For me, and I use that word because I was trying to find something to culminate all my years of experience. Over 2 decades, I did programming from some big major companies, $1 million systems. I did digital forensics when that first came on the scene. So I did a lot of this stuff, and I wanted to find a way to give myself a title that wasn't like, okay, I used to be a programmer, I used to be this or this. And technologist just stood out to me because it's showing that I am, and I don't want to say expert, but technically knowledgeable or have that experience. And that's something that is my core. So I'm not just your everyday person who says, oh, okay, yeah, I know how to turn on a computer and surf the net. I go a little bit deeper than that. So technologist was the word that I chose to brand myself as.
I love it. I love those kind of because then you own it. You're owning that brand all day long, and it really does stand out. I'm telling you, somebody who was just new to who you were coming into this interview. So bravo on that. Maybe we could pivot to the book a little bit, and without giving too much away about your book. So for everybody listening, it's called From a Mess to Amazing: 7 Steps to Create the Life You Deserve. Tell us a bit about it, and then what led you to write the book in the first place?
The book is half my personal memoir and half motivation, self-help, however you want to categorize it. And it's an easy read. It's like 100 pages or less. But I thought about writing this book as far as looking over my life reflectively, and from the childhood on up, and just my journey on the things that I did throughout life, some of the mistakes I made, how I overcame them. Because about 10 years ago, I really was at a dark place in my life. I found that I had all of these things as far as experience, the degrees, the certifications, and I was, great on paper. I looked great on paper, but I really wasn't happy inside. I felt at that time, I was like, oh my God, I'm being a horrible mother. I had came off a deployment with the Navy. I had gotten a divorce. I had moved across the country to a new state with my kids who were small at the time. I'm talking like 4 and 5.
Mm-hmm.
And I was just like, I'm so unhappy. I'm like, I had a good job. I was making decent money, but my life just I wasn't happy. I was thinking about my childhood. I had a lot of resentment to my mother, and my mother has been passed since 2006, but those things would come up into my head. So a lot of things played into this, but I was thinking, well, if I could feel this way and I'm a successful person, and, for all intents and purposes, if I could feel helpless and hopeless, I'm pretty sure there's other people who feel like this. And I wanted to share my story and how I came over it and what they could do, and just let them know that we all make mistakes. We're all human, and your mistakes don't define you. And that was very hard for me, because I started to really beat myself up on some of the mistakes I had made in life, because I was thinking, how could somebody who's so smart, so accomplished, how could you do these things?
Mm-hmm.
And, we're always our own worst critic, right? We're always saying, oh my God, you're so stupid. How did you do that? We say things to ourselves that we would never say to anyone else.
100%.
So I was like, if I feel this way, I'm pretty sure someone else does. And I just wanted people to know that it's okay. It's okay to have made mistakes. It's okay to feel that your life is not all together. And it's okay that if you started out here, that doesn't necessarily mean that's where you're going to stay or end up. So that's why I wrote the book, and just to kind of be an inspiration for other people.
Yeah. In speaking more about yourself, one question, and it's sort of tangential to the book, but because it's obviously sort of partially memoirs and then partially self-help, like you said, if you want to call it that. Right now, a big buzzword is privilege that we hear in America, right? And that this idea of privilege. And so somebody who came up from literally nothing like you, and in the background that you did, what is your take on this buzzword of privilege? Does it exist? You think that some people are inherently more privileged than others just because of their skin color? Or does it simply exist as a mental construct, maybe to those that want to play victim, so they have an excuse to not get out like you did?
I definitely know it exists. So I don't think it's something that someone made up and it's totally untrue. But I think it could fall in both of those categories that you stated. I think that, yes, privilege does exist with certain people, whether it's race or your financial upbringing, whatever that is, because there is, and we've seen it, we all seen it, whether people want to admit it or not, you have seen it. And I know someone said to me, and this was a white gentleman and friends with, and he was like, I grew up poor. I'm not privileged. I said, I know that, you know that, but in certain instances, you are privileged because you're not fighting the same plight that I'm fighting. And I really had to have this conversation with him for him to understand it. And like I said, by him being a friend, he didn't take it the wrong way.
Uh-huh.
So that does exist. Then it's the privilege, the second one that you mentioned, as far as people using that so that they don't have to work hard or whatever that case may be, or the fact that they feel that they can just sit down and maybe ride on mommy's daddy's coattails, whatever.
Yeah. Yeah. Because it could go in that direction too. Exactly. I think that's a great point.
Yeah, it could go either way. So you could have someone who's saying, oh, well, it's easy for that person because you're this, but it's not that easy for me. That's an excuse. Yeah, that's totally, I'm not in for that either. But then you could have the person who's the privileged person who never had to work, never knew that, okay, I have to really scratch and claw and work for things because it was always given to them, or there was always a means for them to get. And they can look at somebody like me and say, I don't understand that. I don't understand what she's saying. That's not true. That doesn't exist. Well, it doesn't exist in your world because you never knew that. You never had to do these things. So I think it could go either way.
Yeah, that is such an interesting and nuanced take. And I really appreciate that there was a nuance and kind of recognizing even the other extreme on the very, very privileged side and how that could be a crutch. And maybe excuse isn't the right word, but like a crutch.
Yes.
Because at the end of the day, you could have used all those crutches, or I could have used those, or even the wealthy people. But it's what you do with these hands of cards. And some people get the worst cards dealt to them. It could be it could be like a very low end poker cards, sort of hand. But they played them right and they played them almost perfectly. And then they got out of that mess and now they're left with all aces and that sort of thing. Back to the book. What is one thing maybe you could share with our audience from the book that they could take away from this podcast? If there's just one thing that you could share from it that you feel like is valuable.
The one thing that I would share, and this is how I start the book off, is mindset. Mindset is everything. If you don't change what's going on internally, there's no way you're going to change anything externally. And again, I'm talking from experience. This is something that took me a long time to realize and do. And if we're all honest with each other and with yourself, it's something that it is hard because we all, whether it's how you grew up and a certain perspective or mentality that you have, or the things that you experienced, we all have those things that shape us and that play in our mind. So your mindset, and it can go either way, whether it's your mindset about your life, about relationships, about money, all these things start with you and your mind and you internally. So you can't say, that's like saying, I want to lose 50 pounds. Okay, that's great. So what are you going to do to lose the 50 pounds? Now, I can't say I want to lose 50 pounds and I'm drinking a large Coca-Cola every day.
Mm-hmm.
So it starts with your mind. So I'm not going to get up every morning and work out until I've told myself, okay, this is what I need to do to get myself to losing my 50 pounds, to get on this journey. I need to get up. I need to walk. I need to do whatever. So, and I put the 50 pounds out there because everybody can relate to the losing weight, right? We all feel that we can do something better about our bodies. But unless you have in your mind and understand that, okay, I'm not going to lose these 50 pounds by just sitting on a sofa watching Netflix, nothing's going to happen. So that's how things roll in motion. So that's the one thing I would say. And I want to tell the listeners that if you go to my website and you go to the page where my book is, I also have a complimentary workbook that goes alongside of that you can just download. And it's where you can journal, because I give some examples and some exercises in the book where you can journal and write your answers down. And it's free. You can just go ahead and download that.
Yeah, that's wonderful. Yeah. What's the website? Give us a little plug here.
My website is trinalmartin.com. And if you go to /books, you'll see my books there. And you can download that workbook.
Beautiful. Beautiful. One question I like to ask every guest. So I'm not going to not ask you, Trina, knowing what you know now, and if you could go back in time and give yourself one piece of advice, maybe even before you started college, what would that one piece of advice be?
My one piece of advice that I would tell my young Trina is be true to yourself. And just to expound on that, I would say that because growing up, I was a people pleaser. And that stemmed from having the verbally abusive mother, just always looking for acceptance because I didn't get it from my mother, which ended up spilling into looking for it in men in relationship. But I would tell myself, just be true to yourself, and that's enough.
Yeah. Yeah. And the people who are going to accept you are the people who are going to accept you. And the people who aren't, maybe you could never get them to accept you.
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly. And you have to be true to yourself as far as your beliefs, your core. I mean, even how you think, you have, and I'm sorry if I'm going off.
That's okay.
But I remember growing up, people telling me like, let's just talk about relationships. So I would say, okay, I want X, Y, Z. And then somebody was like, oh, your standards are too high, And then now that I think about it, I'm like, that's so stupid to tell somebody their standards are too high.
Yeah.
And I think about how I listened to that, and I ended up settling and getting into some horrible relationships. So that's where be true to yourself. If you want XYZ and that's what you want, that's your limit, that's your non-negotiable, your boundary, stick to that. Don't listen to what anyone else has to say.
100%. Trina, you have been a wonderful guest. I really appreciate your time on this podcast. If people want to listen to your podcast, if they want to get in touch with you and maybe work with you, how can people follow you on social media, and obviously tell us about the podcast?
So my podcast is called Trina Talk, and I'm on iTunes, Spotify. I'm on everywhere you can listen to podcasts, but it is a little bit of inspiration, a lot of everything. So I actually talk to entrepreneurs, business leaders, just people who have inspiring stories, who want to share their journey. So I've even had some celebrities on the show where they're talking about not just, oh, I'm so great, I'm this, but they're saying, okay, this is how I started out. And here's some of my journeys and my knocks, my successes and my failures. And that's one of my stipulations of the show is if you come on my show, you have to be real. And you have to tell successes as well as failures. It's unscripted, so I don't have any scripted questions. The guests don't know what I'm going to ask. It's conversational. So a lot of people listen and love it. I love it because you really get people who are not looking at a script, right? Just going by it. If you want to get in touch with me, like I said, my website is trinalmartin.com. So if you want coaching or tech consulting, you can find me there. If you want to personally reach out to me, I'm on LinkedIn. That's my platform. So you can DM me right there and I can get with you.
Beautiful. Thanks so much for being on today, Trina. We wish you nothing but the best.
Thank you for having me. It's been a joy.
All right. Ciao.